All right, welcome to the Solar Surge weekly live sales training. Folks, we are streaming out live to YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And of course, we are here every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern for the 1 hour live sales training. Riding shotgun with me today, back my usual co-host, Dan Freshley, CEO of Radiant Solar, back joining me for the live training. And Dan, I've really been looking forward to giving this particular lesson with you because this is so important, so crucial to solar business success. I know we talk about technical details a lot on this channel, but knowing the numbers that tell you the health of your business are such an important part, and really looking forward to giving this training with you.
Yeah, likewise. I'm very much a numbers guy. I think, jokingly or funny enough, mathematics wasn't really my thing growing up, but as a business owner and as a salesperson, knowing my numbers is absolutely critical. So as I learned that, I really have now kind of pivoted where a lot of my friends joke with me about how much of an Excel geek I am or whatever it is, but like your numbers are absolutely critical. And that's what I live by now. So looking forward to kind of getting into that conversation.
Absolutely. Hey, by the way, guys, as always, the reason that we're doing the live training is because we can actually see your comments and questions coming in real time. So whether you're on YouTube, you can use the live chat bar. But if you're on Facebook, LinkedIn, just post a comment on the post. It'll come up on our dashboard here. Dan has a dashboard on his side as well. And so we're going to do our best to get you real-time answers to those questions. Doesn't have to be specifically on the topic of performance indicators, which is the topic of today's lesson, but really anything having to do with the solar sales profession or the solar installation profession, go ahead and put your questions there in the comments, and we'll do our best to get those answers to you in real time.
Absolutely. Also curious too, if anybody that's tuned in now, drop where you're located, because I'm curious where some of our audience is coming from too. Maybe, city, state, or hey, if you're joining us possibly internationally, I don't know. Let us know where you're from. I'm always curious to hear where people are tuning in from and where solar is booming. So
Great. All right, well, let's go ahead and get into it here, Dan. So, there's a number of different numbers and metrics that we could look at when we're talking about a solar business. I guess maybe the first place to start is just the basic unit economics of a solar project. What should a solar project cost? How much should it cost you to get that customer? And how much commission should you pull per project? So I'll just pose that question to you, Dan. What do you think is a healthy cost per acquisition? And what do you think is a healthy gross commission, and what should be sort of your gross profit per solar project?
yeah, great question. So I'll preface too, guys, a lot of the terms we're going to kind of speak from industry language. A lot of times we're referring to things on a price per watt basis, or sometimes it's just called PPW. But wanting to know things on a price per watt basis. Now, specifically, Joe, about CPA, cost per acquisition. I think we've talked about this before, but if I had one number that was like my holy grail for the status and the condition and the health of my business, it would be the CPA. Because I know that if my cost per acquisition is at a certain price point, really everything is going to be working and functioning properly. Because I know, hey, average commission is this, gross earnings are this, profitability is this, based on that CPA. As the CPA rises and falls, or decreases and increases, that's really where my business is growing or contracting in some way. So what I have really said for a long time, Joe, is a CPA that I am oftentimes targeting is a sub 1,500, but ideally sub $1,000 cost per acquisition. And when we're talking about that cost per acquisition, we're talking about what was my legitimate all-in expense to acquire that business. Right now, there's a lot of different ways you can measure that. Most of the times when I'm measuring CPA, I'm measuring on my marketing budget, right? So any advertising dollars I might have been spending on, let's say, Facebook, but it could also be, maybe an agency that I've had to hire to run and manage that advertising, right? That's going to obviously increase my CPA a lot of times. And we can unpack that conversation a little more, but that might increase my CPA. But I really want that CPA with my dollars spent on Facebook, my dollars spent towards agencies managing things for me. Maybe I have an appointment setter or an internal team that's handling these leads, and I have to pay them a commission or an hourly rate or some sort of wage for doing the job that they're doing. So I need to factor those things in. And if I look at that at the end of a project or the end of I typically calculate these a lot of times on a monthly basis. I want to know, okay, how much did I spend on advertising this month? How much did I spend on my agency this month? How much did I pay my appointment setters this month? total that all up, divide that number by the amount of sales. That was my CPA. So that number for me, again, ideally is going to be sub 1,500, sub $1,000. There have been months in the past where I've seen that number go above 2,000, 2,500, $3,000. When it gets to that sort of area, I know that something is broken. Something's not working right. It's either maybe our advertising copy, the creative, the look, the writing, maybe that was misleading. And so it was generating leads, but we weren't actually generating sales. Maybe it was something in my appointment setters functionality of the way they were making the calls. And I want to go back and I want to pull call recordings, I want to listen to things, I want to role play, I want to train on that to help improve. Maybe it was my agency I was working with, just things weren't being managed as well. And so you got to keep a really tight eye on all of those different functions. And so really, again, you got to make sure that that number is an appropriate range. And then I think the other question you would ask Joe too was a little bit about, total revenue of a project. What I typically would see from that perspective, if we're looking at available sales commissions, generally could be somewhere between $5,000 to $7,000 on a total project. It kind of depends on what it is. A lot of our methodology, Joe, I know we price and we calculate things a lot of times on percentage basis, and we can maybe talk more about that. But in a $5,000 to $7,000 total revenue generated from a project range, I would then know if I had an acquisition of $1,000 that my profitability on that project might have been $4,000 to $6,000. So it just sort of depends. But how about on your side, Joe?
Right, right. And you're right, Dan. I mean, I know that we could say the same thing speaking a different language in terms of price per watt, but just to use some round numbers here, let's say we're targeting an average 10 kilowatt system, right? A 10,000 watt system. And so I know the numbers that I use to keep me in sort of a healthy general range is I want on average about $5,000 total gross commission, and I want my acquisition cost to be about $1,500 or less. So if we're talking price per watt, we want 50 cents per watt total gross commission, and we want 15 cents per watt cost of acquisition or less. In the solar sales business, you really have just two main expense categories: acquisition cost and commissions that you have to pay out to your sales reps if you have a team under you. So if you can kind of think of it, pretty much everything is going to fall into one of those two buckets: acquisition or commission. Now, here at Solar Surge, you might say, well, Joe, you have travel expense. You're going to all these conferences. You have video editing expense because you got to, put all the YouTube videos out, and then you got to pay your video editor. So there's payroll expense. In reality, all of that is acquisition cost, right? So Solar Surge, we do a video content marketing strategy. That's how customers find us, right? That's how many of you probably found us. But all of the cost that goes into producing the videos, including airfare to get to the conferences, meals that I might spend, hotels, at the conferences, what I pay my editor, what I pay for any kind of video hosting or editing software, all that at the end of the day goes into a bucket called acquisition, right? And if you're doing a different acquisition method, right, you may be paying appointment setters, you're buying leads, you're running ads, but at the end of the day, it's going into that bucket that's called acquisition cost. And then you look at that compared to what gross commissions that you're able to generate based on all of that activity. So for me, I'm able to kind of keep the numbers in that healthy range because we do, now that we've kind of made the initial investment of the video equipment and a lot of the softwares, it doesn't really cost us that much each video we produce, but there is a cost there. There certainly is a cost there, and all of that goes into acquisition, right? And I think we really have to start the conversation there, because if the basic unit economics of the project don't work, if you don't know, hey, if I spend this amount to generate leads, generate opportunities, and I can generate commissions of this amount, if the basic unit economics don't work, then there's nowhere to go from there anyway, right? You can't scale it up if the core unit of business doesn't work. So I think that's why I wanted to start the conversation there. Dan, I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think if you're a sales only organization, the reality of it is you're not buying materials, you're not buying, you're not paying for labor directly, right? I mean, you depending on your accounting methodology, you might justify your install partners as a cost of goods sold, where you're hiring them to do a job for you, but it's an indirect thing. You're not having to pay for it yourself directly. So really, as a sales organization, almost every expense that you run through your business probably in one way, shape, or form contributes towards your CPA, right? In most cases. Even if that is, hey, I'm going to attend RE plus, or I'm doing this or doing that, you're probably doing that act as a desire to produce, a sale, produce an opportunity. So when I measure everything as well, I look at things monthly, I'll look at things quarterly, and then I will go back and look at my totals for the entire year. And one question and statement I wanted to address here was this comment that Whaling City Solar just commented in here, and appreciate these numbers. I would say right now, as you're looking at this, a $1,200 acquisition cost is a great number. It's a healthy place to be. But I would say, when you mentioned it doesn't include software 3D DSM data per opportunity, should it? I would say yes, right? Because you do want to understand both, maybe first, sort of the direct acquisition cost, right? How much money did I spend on my marketing platform or Energy Sage or whatever provider I'm using? That'll tell you one number, but you don't want to convince yourself, and you want to make sure you don't fall victim to thinking, oh, hey, my acquisition's only 1,200, because you could have this crazy high expense on design softwares and other tools and stuff that you're not properly considering into that variable. And so I'll a lot of times break them apart in both ways. I want to know, okay, well, what was like the direct activities that led to sales? Was that my advertising, appointment setters, and then commissions and stuff being paid? Okay, like what was that number? But then I also want to know the bigger picture of, hey, how about all my software tools? How about my DocuSign service I pay for, my CRM platform, my ancillary other tools that I use, right? Like I want to add all those up and break those down. And I go through this exact exercise on every different marketing or lead channel that I have. And last year, for my company, Radiant Solar, I mean, we had a lot of different ones we worked with. We had Facebook advertising, we had this agency, that agency. Maybe it was Energy Sage, maybe it was solar reviews, maybe it was referrals, maybe it was homeowners association presentations that we did, and we paid referral incentives. So I break all of those down. And that's why it's important, maybe a tip here, when you're tracking your sales, make sure you're tracking exactly what the lead source was, so you can filter these later to go run this report. Because I would have no idea how to attribute those if I wasn't tracking my lead source properly. But I'll go in and I'll track those things at the end of the year. I'll total everything up and then base, okay, X amount contributed to this bucket, Y to this bucket, Z to this bucket, and figure out, okay, what was the true acquisition cost? The other thing I would make sure to do as well, it's a little hard to track it this way, but when you generate a referral from one of these lead sources, that acquisition, that profitability should be attributed back to the original lead source. So for example, let's say Whaling City, Solar, you guys are using Energy Sage. If you sell a customer on an Energy Sage, an Energy Sage customer, and that Energy Sage customer turns around and passes you a referral, it would make sense to attribute that referral back to Energy Sage as being the lead source. The reason being, and I would call it a referral as well, but that relationship does affect your Energy Sage outlook, right? Like, what was your CPA from Energy Sage? Because had you not generated the first, sale from Energy Sage, you wouldn't have gotten to the referral later. So sometimes I've made that mistake in the past where maybe I noticed my Facebook advertising was running at $2,000 CPA, but I had also generated 5 or 6 referral sales from leads that came from Facebook originally. If I didn't attribute that back properly, I would look at Facebook and say, oh, I need to cut this off. The numbers aren't good. But the reality of it is no, when I add in those 5 or 6, that $2,000 now drops down lower, and it actually is good. So you just need to make sure you clearly understand your strategy as far as also how you're trying to generate your referrals, and really making sure, hey, anytime I spend dollars on leads, those are gold. I really, really, really need to also tap into a referral opportunity with those people, right? If you're doing a great service, you're performing a phenomenal job for your client, why wouldn't they want to, pass 1, 2, 3 of their most, trusted people to you? I've had some referral partners or, customers of mine that have given me 10, 12, 15 referrals over the years. And I'm glad to pay referral incentives to those people as well, because there is a mutual benefit all around. So little side tangent about that, but just make sure you're attributing that as well.
Yeah, and thank you, Whaling City Solar, for the engagement here and for the comments. In fact, it looks like there's another comment here from Whaling City Solar saying he agrees that's tough when the design software industry has shifted to per design versus a fixed monthly range, say $20 to $30 each project. Makes a difference how many leads are top of funnel and at what close rate. Thank you for that comment, because that's a great lead into exactly what I wanted to share, which is that once you understand the basics of total cost of acquisition minus, or sorry, total gross commission minus total cost of acquisition equals gross profit. Once those numbers are in a somewhat workable, healthy range, and again, what I would recommend is about $5,000 average total gross commission, about $1,500 or less total cost of acquisition means a contribution or a gross profit into your business, cash you can use to run your business, of about $3,500 per project. If the numbers are in that range, now you can start thinking about, okay, how do I pump up the volume? How do I ramp this up? And then now it starts looking at exactly what Whaling City Solar is talking about, is how many leads do I have to put into the top of the marketing funnel to get the results that I want in terms of actual sales and income out of the bottom of the funnel. So when we talk about the marketing funnel, what we're talking about is basically you've got leads coming in the top. Some of those leads are going to turn into appointments. Some of those appointments are going to turn into proposals. Some of those proposals are going to turn into sales. Some of those sales are going to turn into installs. And the installs, if you're working with the right installer, are going to turn into income, cash coming into your business. And so we want to know what's the rate of conversion through each stage of that marketing funnel, right? How many leads do I have to get to get one appointment set? And of the appointments that I'm set, what percentage of those are qualified to actually receive a proposal? And then of the proposals that I give, how many of those are actually going to accept my proposal and sign the deal? And then of the deals I get signed, how many of those are actually going to make it all the way through to install so I can get fully paid out? So I think that's the basics. Those are the basic KPIs that I think about, Dan. What about you?
Yeah, absolutely correct. I mean, you start at kind of top of funnel, but the reality of it is you're reverse engineering this to the result you want to accomplish, right? So we could do the math, but it's saying, hey, I want to make $100,000 a year. If I know that I can earn an average, commission of, $5,000. Okay, well, how many deals do I need to do? But then you reverse back from there. If I can close 1 out of 4, how many leads do I need to generate? I'm trying to remember the exact phrase that I was told, but it was something to the extent of there's a rule in marketing where, let's say you generate 100 leads. What I've personally experienced over the years, having spent, I mean, last year alone, I think I averaged around $15,000 to $25,000 per month in Facebook advertising dollars. And that was a feedback loop, as people would say, where the idea is I didn't start there. I had to start much, much smaller, allocate money on every project and feedback it into the funnel and grow and scale and try to play the volume strategy, right? So that number can sound huge, but the number is only really high because there was profits that allowed for that to occur and was continuously being reinvested back into. But really the main thing that I've kind of seen traditionally is that if I generated 100 leads, I'm probably only going to, and this is from Facebook advertising, different channels are going to have different conversion rates. So you'll have to kind of figure out what those are for yourself. But for Facebook, I had seen if I generate 100 leads, about 50% of those 50 leads, I would actually be able to successfully make contact with. So the other 50, frankly, I probably wasn't going to be able to contact no matter how many times I had my appointment setting team calling them, doing text message marketing, email marketing. They just were ghosts. I wasn't going to be able to get in contact with them. But rather than dwelling on that, I was dwelling on the 50 that I actually got in contact with. From the 50 I got in contact with, you could say that of that 50% of those I was able to successfully book appointments with. So we now went from 100 to 50 to 25. Out of those 25, we would have obviously certain show rates, no show, cancels, for the appointments themselves. Fortunately for us, our cancel rate and no show rate was typically pretty low. I might see, 20% cancellation rates. So 25 appointments booked, 20% cancellation rates, coming out around 20 that we're actually sitting down with. But then of those 20, we typically had a close rate of about 25%. So I can figure out, okay, starting at 100, boiling all the way down, we're looking at what's the exact math? 5, right? 5 sales on that number. So that was kind of the recipe. So then the question would become, okay, well, like what was my cost per lead? If I had to generate 100 leads, how much did it cost me to generate those leads? So all of these KPIs are things you kind of need to know and begin to understand a little bit. But that's kind of the formula that I had typically seen. Is I always assumed 50% of the leads I generated, I would never contact. Out of that remaining 50%, was targeting trying to book appointments with 50%, I know I'm going to have some cancel, some no shows, and then I'm trying to really focus on my close rate, right? Like I can't close somebody I don't meet with, but if I can meet with 5 people and I can close really, really well, and I can close 3 of those 5, that can still get me the same thing. And maybe I don't need to go generate 100 leads. So as a sales professional, we always obviously want to work on our skills of closing and selling and providing value. But, knowing what your numbers are at the top of the funnel and how those work their way down is also very important.
Yep. Yep. Critically important. In fact, looking at another comment here from Whaling City Solar, he's saying, well, bidding 100 addresses to close 2 versus 5 can change that CPA significantly. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you're talking about a 2.5 times or 250% swing in your CPA based on whether you hit 2 or 5 sales in that month out of those 100 projects. And that certainly is an issue if you are providing the proposal software or the proposal generation service to your sales dealers, which it sounds like you are here, Whaling City Solar. If you're paying the per project fee from your design software, but you have no way to tie that back to your sales organization's performance, that's actually the same position we're in here at Solar Surge. So at Solar Surge, we don't typically use our installers' design software. We have everything on Aurora. That way, we know we have the most accurate numbers at the time of sale. But that's a cost that we bear at Solar Surge. And so one of the things that we look at is, in terms of internal KPIs, is what's the ratio of projects created to deals sold. And if one of our dealers gets out of whack in terms of the ratio of projects created to actually deals submitted, actually, contracts sold, then we pull them aside and have a talk and see what's going on. Why aren't the conversions there? Because we're not going to continue to put out that expense to provide the best software if they're not converting. And of course, there's ways we can get people back on track. As of course, we have a lot of content, a lot of information on how to sell solar the right way so that your proposals do convert. And I know for me, I typically want to see my conversions in about that 25% range. For a virtual sale, I would consider that a good conversion performance of proposals that you've delivered to a legit, bona fide, qualified prospect. About 1 in 4 of those should close into a signed contract. Dan, what do you think on that?
Yeah, I would agree with that one too. And Whaling City, I appreciate you continuing some comments here because I want to address one of these here. But Joe, I would agree that typically, I personally in my own career, and I would say, look, I'm probably not the best solar salesperson ever. I'm not the most hard close, persuasive, like you got to sign today. But I would also say that on the other side, my cancellation rate over my career has been very, very, very low because that's not my methodology. So pros and cons on either side. My career, I've probably averaged between 20 and 30% close rate. You could say 25% being that neutral in the middle. I know pretty consistently that if I can run 4 meetings, I can close one of them. And that's typically what I've built my assumptions on, and kind of like, all right, hey, this is where I want to go. This is what I'm looking to earn. Okay, what do I need to do to get there? I can close 1 in 4. That's kind of been my logic. Whaling City, I appreciate this other comment you just brought in here too. So I'm curious on this, and maybe you can drop another comment here. The 3% close all focused on cash and loans. Is that 3% on your total amount of leads? Or are you saying that's 3%? I imagine it's probably on your total amount of leads. It's saying, hey, we can close 3% of our total amount of leads, which I look at those numbers too. I like to understand not only like the funnel math, right? Like this amount of appointments, this amount of sits, this amount of closes. But I do sometimes also want to know, hey, just based on the raw data, the numbers I gave a second ago, right? If I had 100 leads that ultimately the funnel math got me down to 5 sales, well, I could also do the math of saying, okay, well, what is 5 divided by 100? Okay, I'm at a 5% sale rate on raw leads, which I imagine is what you're referring to here in this 3%, sale rate on all of your leads, which I'd say that number is probably, if we did the math backwards on it, in a acceptable range. You just need to be mindful, obviously, of other expenses like Joe was just talking about that maybe you don't immediately attribute to the project directly, but then you realize, like, man, I'm burning money somewhere, and it's like, why am I not growing? Why is the bank account not moving forward? It's because you're getting pulled out a lot of money that you're not attributing back into your CPA. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind and pay attention to.
Yeah, and just for what it's worth, one of the lead sources, one of the marketing partners that we have endorsed is Solar Reviews. It's a company that I've worked with many years in the past. done dozens and dozens of projects with them. Typically, what we're seeing is about a 7 to 8% lead to sale conversion rate. So if you're just talking about top of the funnel to bottom of the funnel, it's about a 7%, or 1 in 15 leads turns into a customer. With the Energy Sage at 3%, I think that's a little bit on the low end. And you had mentioned about focused on cash loans. I'm not sure if you're saying that the customers are very focused on the cash price or the loan terms, or that's just that you're doing cash and loans and not leases. But I would say one of the reasons that I don't personally endorse Energy Sage, although I have used them in the past, is a lot of their marketing does sort of focus the buyer on price. And there's sort of this implication that, hey, all solar installation is kind of the same. So just shop on the equipment, just shop on the price. But the contractors are pretty much all the same. And the reality is it couldn't be further from the truth. Because in my experience, Energy Sage does not do any kind of like financial vetting on the contractor. So as long as the contractor has like decent customer reviews on the Energy Sage website, which, reviews can be bought, there's not a whole lot of due diligence that I remember of actually like kind of digging beneath the surface to see, is this contractor, like, does this contractor have real financial strength? Are they likely to be in business long term? Or is it just a fly by night company that doesn't know how to do marketing? So they're just buying leads on the marketplace, selling at whatever price they have to sell, and hoping it's all going to work out in the end. And obviously that's not what you want. If you're setting your business up to succeed long term, you don't want to let the market determine your price. You want to know your numbers. You want to set your price and then sell on your value into the marketplace. And so for me, I would prefer not to sell to an Energy Sage audience, because I think there's too much price bias going in. I'd rather, work on positioning yourself as the trusted solar expert that frankly homeowners should be willing to pay a premium to work with you, because you're the top of your game. That's the position that I want to be in.
Yeah, for what it's worth, Joe. I mean, I would echo that. And as someone who used, I'm not intending this to be an Energy Sage bash conversation, but look, we're looking to provide value to sales professionals, installers, people that are looking to generate business. I used Energy Sage at the beginning part of this year for my company, and after about 3 or 4 months from end of 22 into 23, my hypothesis, which you just kind of stated from when we used them previously, was proven true again. And it was just that, number one, the cost per lead model, where they bill you for, per a certain allotment of leads, plus the commission that they are taking on sales that actually occur, those get added in to be considered as the CPA for Energy Sage purposes, right? How many leads did you have to buy at whatever cost, as well as what amount did you pay them for deals you actually close? But the problem was too, is that even on the deals that you closed, I had found that our profit margins were significantly lower than they would have been through our other advertising channels, because Energy Sage sort of promoted this race to the bottom pricing structure, where it was not based on true sales, professional sales activity. The problem that we had is, and I think Whaling City was kind of acknowledging it here in some of the comments, is like, there isn't really the means of engaging with these people directly. You can only engage through the secure, Energy Sage platform unless they contact you. But the problem was that didn't really give you the ability to articulate your company, and your personal unique value that you provide. That very much might be the reason why you are 10, 20, 30 cents a watt higher than the other company. All they're really looking at on paper is what price is the best, what option is the best. They're going to try to vet you a little bit based on your reviews, but there's no actual personal dialogue and an actual, I would say, professional salesmanship that's occurring in an exchange where it's like, hey, I have value, you have value, you have money, I have a product and a service. How do we exchange this? And so that was just my problem with Energy Sage, and why I don't prefer using them. So just something to kind of keep in mind there for anybody else, that was making sure with their particular model, you're calculating both the leads you're buying and the commission fee that you're paying to them, which is just in the form of an invoice. They're going to invoice you for whatever that is. And that, that adds up into your CPA. But I had just found overall that even if I could generate my only strategy for Energy Sage was to try to play the volume card and increase volume, right? And if I could get 10 deals, 20 deals, 30 deals a month flowing from that, then okay, hey, yes, there'd be at lower margins, but the net results would be here. The problem was I was never able to get that volume, and it made more sense to take less deal flow, but at higher price points from other lead, channels. And so we ended up cutting it off for that reason.
Yep. But again, this is why knowing your numbers is so important, because if you analyze these numbers on a per lead source basis, like Dan suggested, right, you're going to run these reports for Energy Sage deals, run them for solar reviews, run them for Facebook, run them for, all your different lead sources to find out which lead sources are the most profitable, and then see how you can scale the ones that are most profitable, right? So I think there's another comment in here, and let's see here. No, I think that pretty much covers everything that we've gone over so far. Okay, so we talked about you have to understand your cost per acquisition. You have to understand your cost per acquisition broken down by lead source, so you can figure out which lead sources to focus on scaling. Now, Dan, do you find it very useful to like just drill down to specific one stage of the funnel, like cost per lead or cost per appointment set?
Yeah, good questions. I do track all of those. So every month when I'm running numbers, again, I think this is probably the key thing for anybody here. We track everything you can, right? Like it's a lot easier if you track your numbers to always go back and run a new report on something than it is to go try to find those numbers later and then run the report. It just kind of takes way too much time. So when I'm referring to track everything, hey, how many leads did I generate? What was my total spend? Because with both of those two things, you can then easily figure out, okay, what's my cost per lead? I do focus on cost per lead, but that is more of just like making sure it's within a certain range that I want to see it within. And there's been moments where that range ticks way higher. Sometimes the cost per leads, if I'm running a very specific type of advertising, might be $100 per lead, $70 per lead, which is really, really high. There's other times where I might be getting leads at $4 a lead or $10 a lead, which is probably on the really, really low side. So on both ends of that, what I know about advertising is that on the high cost per lead side, hopefully those are higher quality leads that are more serious intent individuals. But if I find that, hey, people that are not as high intent are starting to creep in there, I need to adjust something because I can't sustain that kind of cost per lead, $70 per lead or $100 per lead. I mean, you'll blow through your budget very, very quick. But on the same side, I don't want to just waste money on $4 per lead if they're all very low intent people that are just clicking because it's easy to click. So you need to understand those things. You need to also understand your cost per click. That's something that a lot of like Facebook advertising gurus will focus on, is understanding, okay, what is it actually costing you every time someone actually clicks on the lead? Frequency, which is how frequent that ad is being served up to that individual. A lot of times, if you start seeing frequencies that are 2 or in the upper ones that are typically rated as like a 1.5, 1.7, 1.8, you start getting to 2, a lot of advertising people will say that that's too much frequency. You don't want them to keep seeing your same ad over and over and over. You're trying to reach new audiences and new eyes. And if they've already seen it, they haven't engaged with it, then they probably aren't going to engage with it the second time or the third time. So kind of paying attention to some of those things. But those are all not my main focus. Those are things that, like, when I'm in my Facebook Business Manager dashboard and I'm looking at things and I'm kind of scrolling, I have all these things saved, but I'm just kind of glancing at them. The main thing, I really want to know is how much am I spending, how many leads were actually generated. And then once they're in my funnel, I'm tracking in my CRM how many of those leads came in that I actually booked appointments with. And I'm running that report on a weekly basis. If I have an appointment setter who's doing these things, they're keeping track of this. This is part of their core everyday KPI, is making sure they're going in and saying, how many dials did they make? How many people did they speak with? So I want successful contacts. How many did they actually reach? How many appointments did they set? And then on the sales team side of things, we can then figure out, okay, well, appointments were set. What was the show rate, the cancel rate, the no-show rate? And we track those things. And so that's kind of the main basis to the numbers that I want to know. And I'll look at those daily, weekly, monthly, and then pull them together for the year, obviously at the end of a year, but just making sure that things are within a proper range.
Excellent, Dan. Hey, I saw another question here from Cindy Stewart, who asks, we want to design a sales generation platform. We believe providing support will allow our team of installers to do more. How can Solar Surge help us and our members? This looks like an interesting question, Cindy. I'm not sure if I understand exactly what you're asking here, though. So if you don't mind posting an additional comment just to kind of explain a little bit more what you had in mind, I'd be happy to answer that. Dan, did anything come to mind to you with this question here?
No, I recall seeing that one come through, and I wasn't 100% clear on what was being asked as well. So yeah, Cindy, if you can provide any clarification here, that'd be great. I just don't know if it's, something that we can provide, whether it be educationally based or access to other install partners. I don't think that's the case because you're referring to already having installers. So yeah, Cindy, if you can clarify that for us, that'd be great. Well, obviously we'd love to address it for you.
Thank you for the engagement, though, Cindy. And of course, guys, if you're watching, go ahead and post the questions into the real-time chat feed, or just post a comment onto the Facebook or LinkedIn, and we'll do our best to get answers to you here in real time. But Dan, listening to your answer to the last question made me think about something that we talked about in the training from 2 weeks ago on how to start your solar business, and why it's so important not only to have a business bank account, but to have an accounting software that's linked to your business bank account. So every transaction is tagged and categorized. So that way, when you're trying to pull these different reports, it becomes very, very easy. You go into your bookkeeping software. I use QuickBooks Online. It's super simple. Everything's hosted for you. But I go into QuickBooks and I can very easily run a report. How much did I spend on Facebook in this date range, right? In this week or in this month? And you can filter expenses by vendor, right? Or you can filter, how much did I spend on software, right? Because your software vendors should all be in your bookkeeping system as well. So again, if you have everything sort of dialed in properly, pulling this data becomes very, very easy. And you can even create sort of these custom memorized reports. So you don't have to set all the filters manually each time. You just go into your favorites or your memorized reports. You hit, acquisition cost by lead source, or however you want to name it. And then boom, you've got the data right there.
Yeah, that's helpful. I mean, again, some of these things, when you get a better feel for what reports and numbers and stuff you want to look at on whatever your frequency basis is, save those things so they're easily accessible, week after week after week, or whatever your time is that you evaluate it. I mean, I know for me, I have a time block on my calendar, which maybe is a principle in and of itself, but I have a time on my calendar every Friday that I'm doing accounting. And I'm going in and I'm looking at things and I'm running reports and I'm just kind of quickly checking on stuff. Typically, I'm always scheduling, once per month at the very least, a meeting with each rep to go through KPIs and numbers. And just look, I'm not doing that as a big brother, as like hey, let me see what you're doing. But it's just as much an activity to make sure that the salesperson is accomplishing their goals as it is to make sure that, within the company's means, things are functioning properly as well. So just a practice there, right? It's like, I believe, and I know, Joe, you're very much the same way. I've never been the micromanagement type of person, but I am the accountability type of person, right? And so if someone says, hey, I want to accomplish a certain result, if it's one of my sales team members, then my goal is like, hey, let me help you get there. What can we do to actually progress and move the needle forward? And the numbers typically aren't going to lie to us, right? We need to know, hey, how many opportunities have you fielded? How many appointments have you done? What's the close rate been? Where are things trending, and how can we help improve on that? Maybe there's training, maybe it's shadowing, maybe it's role plays, maybe it's a book to read, podcast to listen to. So those are things maybe just from a sales side of things, of a practice that I'm in the habit of.
Yeah, no, I think all that stuff is valuable, and doing that stuff on a regular basis. And in fact, that's part of why we do these videos here as well. I mean, Dan and I don't really have to be doing this. We could go mind our business and take all of this skills and information and just use it on our own projects. But we want to share this information with you. We want you all to be successful, especially those of you who are on the Solar Surge dealer network. Big picture, we're not successful unless you are individually successful. And that may mean that there's a little bit of coaching and accountability along the way. I used to work with a business coach for over 2 years in a row, I believe. And, part of our weekly discipline was, okay, Joe, show me your numbers. How many proposals, how many leads, how many appointments, just going through those basics. How much commission earned, how many canceled, how many got installed, right? That's just part of that daily or weekly discipline and accountability, and just making sure that you're staying on track. Because that's one thing, Dan, I've commented earlier, it's very easy to get distracted in this business because there's always somebody on your social media telling you they've got the answer to all your problems. They've got all the appointments, all the leads you ever need. And if you keep biting on that stuff, it's very easy to get yourself pulled off course. So I think having that regular discipline, accountability, routine, it helps you stay on track. I see another comment came in here. from Whaling City Solar. And again, Whaling City Solar, thank you for the engagement on the videos. He was saying same data to support your point, or some data to support your point. Solar Reviews was at $240 each for an exclusive lead over 12 kW in Massachusetts, had to cut them when the site visit rate was under 50%. Dan, I know I have some feedback that comes to mind here, and I'd like to hear your perspective on this too. One of the things I found when we were using Solar Reviews is that the way to get the best engagement from those leads, because again, these are leads that are actively asking for bids. They actually have to opt in how many installers they want to receive a quote from. So I think the intent level is high. One of the things that I found was most successful with dealing with those leads is to give them a proposal or a design first before you try to set an appointment with them. Right. And typically I might do like, hey, here's a simple grid tie only quote based on what I know about your house right now. Here's a quote with a battery backup. At the time, maybe it was a Tesla Powerwall. Here's a single Tesla Powerwall. So they've got a couple of options to consider. They've got a basic roof layout, a roof model, and they understand some basics of what the system could do for them. So then my follow-up was all about just making sure that they got the design and then setting up a meeting so we could refine the design, work out the details, and then get the project going. In other words, I wasn't just another pushy sales guy that wanted to set an appointment so I can get my way, work my way into your living room. I actually took the approach of let me provide as much value as I can up front based on the information that Solar Reviews has already sent over to me. And then when I'm calling, it's, hey, did you get my proposal? Hey, did you get that design I put together for you? I want to make sure that I'm here to answer any questions. So you're just coming off as more valuable up front as opposed to just trying to force your way into the living room. Dan, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I know Joe for a long time, previously when we worked with Solar Reviews, that was our method. And I think if I remember correctly, this is going back some years now, but we knew effectively it was like 1 in 15, I think was our number. We used to really build everything off of. We knew pretty predictably, we buy 15 leads, we were able to generate 1 sale. Now, obviously over the years, as solar's grown in popularity, things change. There's different methodologies. One thing we used to do back then, and I would say, to your point, Joe, is like we used to send kind of a blind proposal, just like, here you go, here's a proposal. And it worked then. I would very much say today, for anyone listening, do not send just blind proposals. That's my opinion. Joe, if you think otherwise, let me know too. But I would not send a blind proposal. Now, what I would do is I would absolutely send them a proposal, but I might send it with a Loom video presentation. And actually, hey, Bob, pleasure to meet you. My name's Dan here from Solar Surge. Wanted to talk through your design for the proposal you're looking for based on the information submitted. And I'm making points of saying, hey, look, like I don't have proper context to what I'm designing here. All the context I have is what you gave when you submitted it, but walk through so they're getting something from you in that. But the reason for doing it on a Loom is because you control what they see when they see it, right? You're adding both visually and audibly explanation to what it is that they're seeing. You're not having to hassle with them. You're not having to, like you said, Joe, some people are just apprehensive to talking to a salesperson. They don't want to feel like they're getting the whole sales pitch or they're getting occupied with all their time meeting with somebody. So I would deliver a presentation to them in that type of manner to kind of kick the conversation off. And then I would preface it with probably like a calendar booking link that says, hey, if you want to schedule a time with me to review this or to discuss other things, feel free to book a time with me. Here's my link. And I'll include that in my video presentation as well as in my email follow-up that I do with them. So that would be an approach that I would take for Solar Reviews. I know to the point that Whaling City Solar was making here is that Solar Reviews does price their leads based on different qualifications. So, for example, if it's a certain utility bill size, that's going to be considered a higher value lead. So the pricing of that lead's higher. If it's an exclusive lead going to only one company, it's a higher price versus if it's going to 3 companies. So there's kind of a metric that they utilize for that purpose. And, I've found over the years as well that, sometimes it makes sense to only buy exclusive. Sometimes it makes sense to actually just, try to buy the cheapest and then work your way into a proper sales, engagement with those individuals. So there's different methodology that goes along with it. One thing I do like about Solar Reviews, if we were just to kind of compare that to the Energy Sage model, is that the Energy Sage model says, hey, here's your price per leads, but then you got to pay us a commission when it closes. You have to bake that number in to what the real cost per lead would have been, right? So if they're charging you, I'm just going to use an easy number. Let's just say Energy Sage charged you $500 for closing that particular lead, but you also spent $500 on buying leads, right? So you spent $1,000 with them. That was really truly your cost per lead or your cost per acquisition as you measure that. Solar Reviews doesn't charge a commission. They're just going to charge you for the lead up front. So the lead cost might be higher than, let's say, Energy Sage or another alternative, but there's no other, costs that come along with that. So you kind of got to try to look at them in that holistic type of manner. That's why, years past, Solar Reviews has been a good resource. I'm actually in the process of doing some pilot testing on a couple things there, and hopefully some point in maybe the next month or two have some numbers to kind of share with people about my own personal real life examples that I saw working with them. But more to come on that as that happens.
Absolutely. And Dan, to touch on what you said, you're right. Going back to when we were using Solar Reviews almost exclusively, and our policy at the time was send the proposal first and then follow up with the phone call and text message and try to set the site visit. At the time, we were selling on price, right? We actually were making the mistake of trying to be the cheapest guy in town, and so we would send the price quote along with the proposal. Now, the way we would do it is we would either do what you said, which is to do a Loom presentation. So you're not emailing them like a PDF price quote that they can just skip your presentation and just go straight look at the price. What we want is for them to actually watch your presentation. We send it on a shareable video link, so you can actually do your presentation, which includes building value. So by the time you get around to showing them the price at the end, you've already conveyed why you're not using the cheapest equipment, why you're not using the cheapest contractor, why it's worth it to pay a slightly higher price to get those additional features, qualities, benefits, and then you might deliver the price at the end. So I would certainly agree with you. What we don't want is just emailing invoices or emailing price quotes before you've had some engagement. What you want to do is you want to build value. The whole idea here is build value. And the recorded screen presentation on Loom is a great way to do that, because you can literally pull up the design software. You can show them the irradiance on their roof. You can show them why you put the solar panels where you place them, why you chose a particular type of solar panel. And then, of course, let them know, and this is what I do too, is let them know that, hey, we can get back on here and make adjustments to the design. So when you're sending that initial proposal, you're sending that to kind of open the conversation, but then inviting them to jump on a follow-up Zoom call with you so that you can together work on finalizing the details of the design and then hopefully move the project into production.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, happy to see it. Whaling City commented here as well about they do a 60-second Loom of doing a roof design. I'll throw this up here really fast, but yeah, that's great. Glad to see that someone's actually using that and doing it in that kind of way, because I think that's a really strategic way in today's market, with people being more accustomed to, the Zoom or the Loom, just like online engagements. I think makes a lot of sense. Loom is one of the things we've loved using, and I know that's been part of our process here for quite a long time. So really cool.
So I'd be interested to hear from you, Whaling City Solar, if you use that 60-second Loom of the roof design, if you've tried using that immediately when the lead comes in before you've set the site visit. And that way you can be providing maximum value up front, as opposed to just trying to set the appointment. Might be worth, something worth trying, just to see if that moves the needle a little bit as far as your lead to site visit ratio that you mentioned.
Absolutely. So, Joe, another question came in here. I'm curious your thoughts. So, David Orcutt had commented in here and said, what effective methods would you suggest I try to find out what solar is selling for in my area? Went on and commented as well, I want to be competitive when setting up a sales business and possible EPC. So, Joe, what would you say is a good way to, figure out pricing, right? Like, where are your competitors? What does the market in your area demand?
Yeah, sure. And by the way, David is a longtime Solar Surge follower and Solar Surge University member. So, David, really appreciate you being here and appreciate the engagement. One place I might go to first is just online in social media groups. There might be a local solar Facebook group for your state or for your community where you can network with other solar homeowners and just get an idea of what they paid. Of course, you could always go to one of these sites as a customer, right? As a potential customer, and request a quote from companies like Energy Sage or Solar Reviews. I mean, I don't really like the idea of doing that because we know that some company is actually paying for that lead to come in. But that is one way you could potentially do it. But I would start on social media. I would look for solar focused Facebook groups in your area, and just kind of throw out there, hey, I'm considering doing a solar project. Just curious, anybody who has solar, what did they pay? And I think you probably find folks that way, and that way you're not costing anybody any money.
Yeah, there are some, I know of some groups that are out there depending on the markets and stuff that do those things. And I agree, Joe, whether we like it or not. I know that I've had tons of competitors do that to me before as well, where
Yep.
they've clicked on my ad, played dumb like they don't know what they're, doing solar wise, and that's fine. Look, it's some people would say it's business. I don't disagree with the statement, but I do think there's also just kind of like an ethics thing sometimes, or just like, is that the only way you could think to get competitive intel? I'd say maybe the other part of it too, just for other people listening, is like if you've got other installation partner relationships in a particular market, you could ask. I know I've done that with some of our installers. I've asked and had conversations before and just said, hey, you don't have to give me specifics because that relationship you have with a separate dealer organization is kind of proprietary. It's private. Like, I don't need to know, but can you give me any indication as to how I'm pacing on my numbers versus what they do? And I've had some of my partners that are friendly enough with me in that regard say, yeah, you're about here. They won't say the company, but they'll say, hey, other companies that we work with are here. So that kind of gives me an idea to know, hey, do I have room to increase my price? Do I need to decrease? How does that play into what I'm seeing on the front lines? Like, what has my conversions been? Has it been harder to generate sales, easier? Obviously the overall market and the economy plays a factor, today a little bit compared to a year ago, where last summer there were interest rates that were 0.49%, 0.99%. It's a very different environment from a financial perspective today. So there's different ways that deals are being done. So, if you're someone that has that relationship with installers already, maybe you just ask those questions and see if they can kind of share some insights with you. Because at the end of the day, if you're a good partner of theirs, anything they can help you to do to generate more business helps them. So they want to make sure they're doing it right. That's why it's important to have good partners, and that's what we have here at Solar Surge, especially when it comes to our Solar Surge, dealer program.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, folks, looks like we have about 7 minutes left. So if there's any other questions that you want to have answered on today's live training, make sure to get them up into the comment section here. And we can go ahead and do our best to get answers to you in real time. In fact, looks like Solar Guy just had a question here. I'll put it up on the screen.
Yeah, I was just about to call that one out there.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on purchasing aged data 30 to 90 days? It's interesting, Dan, because some of you on here may have seen the podcast interview I did with Andy Sendy from Solar Reviews. But one of the things that he said during that interview was that it's actually about a 90-day average conversion, right? A 90-day lag from the initial lead where it came in to when they go solar. And then there are some conversions that happen way after that, 6 months, 9 months later, or a year later. So I wouldn't consider 30 to 90-day old leads aged at all. I would say those are ripe. Those are kind of ripe within the area of interest. And for whatever reason, maybe they didn't once it close, but if they're within 1 to 3 months of having opted in to receiving solar quotes, I would say those are fresh leads, and I would run with them. Dan, What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I've done that. I've definitely done that in the past. I think the biggest thing when you're working with like aged data, so to speak, where what people are really referring to is buying in bulk contact lists or things of that sort. I'll come back to the first one, which really, frankly, is probably the most important, which is making sure that that data is compliant properly. But once you have that data, you really just need to make sure you have a good outreach strategy, that you stay super disciplined to it. And what I have found successful in the past is text messaging, marketing campaigns. So one of the CRM platforms that we utilize here, which is a derivative of the Go High Level system, allows us to nurture those in a text message methodology. So it could be something as simple as, hey, I'm going to send them a text at 9 a.m. tomorrow. If they do not respond, they're going to get a text from me at 5 p.m. just saying, hey, just following up with you. Maybe I'll send them another one the next day. And I'll build out sort of a cadence to how I want to nurture and follow up with those people. That's a big side of what I'll use. Obviously, if you have an appointment setting team or anybody that's on the phones, like loading that into a dialer system and calling and really like marketing to that properly, that's just good old fashioned sales, picking up the phone and calling, right? And just really being disciplined in that. But again, the big thing right now for everybody else that's kind of paying attention to that, there's been a lot of regulatory changes on anti-spamming and TCPA compliance and other things. So you just really need to make sure that the contact lists you're purchasing for the protection of your own business and not having fines and fee, just all sorts of other issues, is that you're purchasing data from people that have legally opted in to be contacted. Because if they haven't opted in to be contacted, you could face a lot of repercussions and problems, on the back end. You just want to make sure you're getting good, quality data. And anybody the problem is too, is that there's a lot of people that will sell you this data. So you need to know, like, if you're working with a professional that really knows how to get this data, they're going to already tell you right away. Like that probably will be part of their leading pitch is, hey, everything is opt-in compliant, etc. If they don't mention that to you, I would assume it's not, and I would shy away from it. So just something to kind of keep in mind when it comes to that.
Dan, in the earlier training that we did about how to market and get leads, you mentioned that whenever you're working with a marketing partner, you want to see what advertising they're putting out to draw the leads in, right? Because I think all leads are not created equal. I mean, you could be, I know I've talked to some of these using some of these third-party marketing services. I've talked to leads that they say came in on Facebook, but then you talk to the leads and they have no idea what they clicked on. It's like, why are you calling me? I have no idea how you got my number. And so there can be a huge difference in the quality of those leads based on how they were drawn in.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it, right? Because there's a lot of times where people will click on a lead and then click on an ad. You'll go to call them, and the classic, anyone that's been doing it long enough, or I didn't click on that. I don't know what you're talking about. What? Who are you? And for the life of me, I still can't figure out how that happens unless people just really don't know that they clicked on something. But that does happen a lot of times. And so making sure, that's going back to what we talked about a little earlier, that's why I might favor sometimes a higher cost per lead than the lower cost per lead, right? Like as the cost per lead increases, typically it's because the ad copy was written better, the creative was better, the intent level of the person that reads what this is and clicks on it, they do a deliberate act to click on it and then fill out information, typically results in a higher quality lead. Now, I would still say the same is true from what I said before. I typically successfully contact 50% of those people. So you're always going to have some people that submit the information and then for whatever reason, it's like their phone number doesn't exist, right? Like you can't find them. But I would favor the higher cost per lead from that perspective versus the $4 leads. Because what I have found a lot of times, every market's different. You need to know your areas. You need to know demographics of the area, likelihood of certain income levels, maybe credit in certain areas. That's all going to be based upon your unique location. But there's definitely been areas where I've said, hey, I want to put more money into this vicinity and not this zip code or area, because it's very easy on Facebook for somebody that's just sitting around all day to be scrolling. Oh, this looks interesting. Click. And they're spending your money every time they click on that, but they had no intent. They just were just clicking on something because they didn't know what they were looking at. So outside of Facebook, running advertising on YouTube has been successful. I've done that in the past, where most of the time people that are on YouTube, like you might be today, are doing this because you're researching a topic, you're paying attention to things, you're more intentional about what you're doing. A lot of times viewers that are clicking on ads on YouTube are the same way. So just another strategy to consider. I don't have as much experience there, but I have ran YouTube advertising for 3, 4, 5 months before. So
Real quick here, I know we're down to the last minute or so. Had another question come in here from a new viewer, David Lukacs, is asking, I've closed over 100 deals through Power with my team of closers. I'm starting my own sales org and wanted to ask, what EPC would you recommend for Florida and California? So one option, David, would be to work with Solar Surge, which would give you access to all of our EPCs in all of those markets. If I had to pick two for Florida, I would say Lunex Power for North Florida, Urban Solar for South Florida. For California, we work with 3 companies presently. Nexus Energy probably has most of our volume. Dan, if you had to pick a California installer, EPC, who would you recommend?
Yeah, obviously I've got phenomenal relationships to everybody over at Nexus Energy and love working with them and worked with them for many years. Outside of that, Elevation Solar is another one that we've worked with in the past. both of those two markets, Florida and California, are two of our, three biggest between Florida, California, and Texas. So those are a couple, but David, the other part of it too is, feel free to book a call. There should be a link in our description to book a strategy call with either Joe or I, and we can kind of jump on with you, hear where you're at, what you're looking to accomplish, where you're looking to go, see if it makes sense to partner with us here at Solar Surge to have access not just to those two states, but some other areas as well, leverage some of the tools and the systems and the brand and just what we have already in place today. I can tell you as well that, we've got a couple partnerships with some other people that are power, people coming from power that have had mixed experiences of success or install times or whatever it may be, that are in a similar boat and understand the value that we're able to help provide. So let's see if it makes sense. Book a call with us. It's pretty hassle free, but let's just see if some sort of partnership would be beneficial.
Yeah, and especially for those two markets, because those are two markets where you're going to have a high attachment rate of storage with the solar. And one of the things with the Solar Surge installers, our installers are very competent when it comes to battery storage. I know many of the solar installers out there are just trying to, kind of getting into figuring out how batteries work. The companies that we've been working with have been doing batteries for years and years and years. And that's certainly going to be important if you're selling in California with NEM3 or in Florida, where you just have so many people who are in that emergency preparedness mindset because of the every year hurricane threat.
Yep. Same thing applies to a place like Texas, obviously, which we've seen a lot of too. So.
Yep, Texas too. In fact, I was just on with the owner of an EPC company in Texas right before this call, and basically Texas is going into NEM3 mode at a very accelerated rate. The solar buyback programs are starting to really dry up, and so people have to be storage minded there if they want to really get the best payback on their solar and be energy independent, not to mention the hail and the ice storms and all that. But anyway, folks, we are over time for this week's live training. I'm sorry we didn't get to, I think there was maybe one last comment there. But folks, we are here every week, Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern time, streaming out live to YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So be sure to jump on the live trainings. Guys, we do these every week for free. You can come here, get the information for free, ask your questions, and we'll do our best to get them answered for you in real time. We will announce next week's training on Monday morning. So if you're on the email list, you can do that. Also, folks, if you're thinking about getting into selling solar virtually, this is the free download that we offer, the Solar Surge 3-step virtual sales process. So there should be a link in the description below. If you want to just download, this is the same process I use, the same process our team uses, to do over 700K a month in solar sales virtually. And so we offer that to you as the free download. That'll also put you on our email list, so you'll get the announcements whenever we're going to do another one of these free live trainings. Dan, do you have anything else for the audience before we sign out for this week?
No, I guess just lastly, as we were kind of mentioning there, anybody that might have an interest in just jumping on a quick discovery call with Joe or I, what we just affectionately call a business strategy call, to kind of learn more about where you're at, what you're looking to accomplish. Maybe you're new to sales, maybe you are a veteran in sales, maybe you have a sales organization, you're looking for good partners, jump on with Joe and I. We're happy to have a conversation, see how we might be able to point you in the right direction, see if it makes sense for us to have some sort of mutual, relationship there as well. So that's down below. And then, of course, anybody that's looking for just additional solar education in general is Solar Surge University. That's Joe and I's combined 20 plus years of just solar knowledge and experience. It's quite literally the exact same training process that I would have for you watching if you were hired by me directly. This is exactly what I would take you through. And we consolidated that into about a 55 video module course, with the goal, quite frankly, being, guys, that we want to be able to try to duplicate our time and give that information away at a reasonable price point, where we can assure you make one sale from the information that we provide, it's paid for itself multiple times over, and you get to hold on to that knowledge and information for life. So just something there as an additional tool for everybody as well. But other than that, Joe,
that's lifetime. Yeah, no, lifetime access to that, guys. And we're going to be updating this too. In fact, we're going to have a module coming out very soon about how to sell the solar lease. I know I've mentioned this for a couple of weeks now, but this is the preferred financing right now, particularly in places like Florida. So we're going to have that training. And, again, lifetime members, you're going to have access to that new training as well. And of course, tune in here every week for the free live training, right? These are here, no cost to us, just to get that value. Again, like I said, I want to provide value to you guys up front. When you're ready to do business, when you're ready to partner up, yeah, we can have that strategy call. We can have that conversation, but we believe in providing as much value into the marketplace first, whether you're talking about homeowners, sales reps, or even brands that we partner with. That's just part of our philosophy. Well, folks, I am way over time now, so I am going to sign out. Thank you for tuning in to another Solar Surge live training. Dan, thank you so much for providing your perspective and insights on this one. And I look forward to see you back here next week.
We'll see you then.